Okay. So we're gonna do the interview. We're gonna do the interview in English. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Might throw in some Hebrew
Yeah,
words.
yeah,
in
exactly.
there,
So
'cause
today is the 1st of March, 2015,
15, right.
and we're at Haviva.
Wiener. Wiener.
And,
W-I-E-N-E-R.
and in Hebrew,
Vav Yud Nun Resh.
Haviva
Wiener.
Okay. So Haviva, I want to start with you telling me when and where you were born, and try and tell me as much as you can about your background, about your parents.
Okay. Beseda? Now?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And the important thing is that you and I always have to have
Eye
eye contact. Always very,
Okay.
very, very.
Not the camera.
No, not the
Eye
camera,
contact-
me.
Eye contact with
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's go.
Okay, well, I was born in Berlin in 1924.
1924.
Yeah, in May. It doesn't matter.
May what?
May 29th,
May 29.
1924.
In Berlin.
In Berlin. But my parents were not German. It's an interesting story. It's a story of so many Jews. The Wandering Jew. My mother is from Latvia, Dvinsk. My father is from Lita. What was the name of his town? Verzbolov, on the German border. And through a shatchan or shatchanit, they met, and
Which is a matchmaker?
a matchmaker, yeah. Matchmaker. My father waited to see all his younger sisters married and his brothers doing well in business. He sent two boys to medical school.
So your father was the oldest?
One of the older ones, but he was the responsible one. And when he was 35, he said, well, now I have to get married. And he didn't know how to go about it, so he went and found a good matchmaker who recommended this family that had four girls of marriageable age, and he came to Dvinsk. Dvinsk is now called Dunaberg or Daugavpils, depending which language, because Latvia changed hands so many times.
German, Russian,
Right,
Latvian.
Right.
Yeah.
So the sister that he liked best also liked him best.
Okay.
And they became engaged. They were engaged for 2 years without getting, even though my father was already 35 years old. But he waited because he wanted to make a living. And he moved the business, the family business, to a place in Russia called Nizhny Novgorod. Nizhny Novgorod.
I've heard the name.
Yeah. And my brother was born there.
So what was your father's occupation? What kind of business did he have?
He was a businessman, but not a very large businessman.
Okay.
And they had different businesses all the time. What do I do about the telephone?
We'll stop.
I'll just...
Yep. Okay, so you were telling me about your father's occupation.
My father, the whole family, all the brothers were in business together, and they had various enterprises, and the one that my father took to Russia was making brushes out of pigs' bristles.
Okay.
That was quite an occupation for European Jews in the shtetl. They had very many, they called it chazaher or something like that, and he didn't do it. It was a factory, and he supervised the factory. But they went to do all kinds of other things also.
So he was kind of an entrepreneur, kind of on a small scale?
Yeah, I would say a small businessman. But they did well. They did well. They were middle class.
Uh-huh.
They were not workers. Many of the Jews in Europe at that time were actually physical workers, but they weren't. And they moved to Nizhny Novgorod, and my brother was born there.
Nizhny Novgorod, where is that located geographically, kind of? It's south.
South. In Russia,
yeah.
south.
South.
Right.
I would say near the Caspian Sea or the Black Sea. Towards the Black Sea?
I don't know. I wasn't in Russia. I would have liked to look the town up.
Yeah.
But it was a medium-sized town.
Mm-hmm. And are your mother and father, are they religious? Are they...
Well, they were, both of them, brought up in a Haredi home.
Yeah.
But they weren't. But they weren't anti-religious either. My in-laws were in the Bund. They were not in the Bund.
Your in-laws?
Yes. My in-laws, my husband's parents.
Were in the Bund?
Were in the Bund in
The German Communist Party?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll
get
Jewish,
to that. Yeah, we'll get to that.
But
yeah.
they weren't.
Yeah.
And my father was a Zionist. And he would have liked to be traditional.
Yeah, sorry.
He would have liked to be traditional, more so than my mother. But it wasn't all that important. You know, the Jews who go to Shul on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and sometimes on Shabbat.
Okay.
Anyway, in 1918, when my brother was born,
Was he sick?
it was no longer good for a businessman, even a small one, to be in Russia. They had to flee.
Wait a sec.
It was during the Communist Revolution.
Hold on a second, I just want to...
You're having trouble with the light?
Just a little. Okay, so what year is your brother born in?
In Nizhny Novgorod in Russia.
In which year around?
1918.
1918.
Yeah.
And your parents get married a year before that or something like that?
My parents were married a year or two before that.
Before that.
Yeah.
And they flee from Russia?
It was a long story. My mother took the Siberian Railroad and with the baby, and it was very difficult. And they got typhoid, and but they ended up in Berlin. Why in Berlin? Because one of the brothers had the family business in Berlin, which was already not brushes at the time, it was chemicals. They went from one thing to the next. They had several different ones. So we arrived in Berlin, and my father began working with his brother in Berlin. And that's how come I was born in Berlin. And my sister was born in Berlin.
Are you the oldest or the youngest?
I'm the middle.
You're the middle.
I'm the middle.
So you have an older brother,
older brother,
and then a sister.
And a younger sister.
Now, before we get to you and everything, just a little bit about your family. So you said that both of your parents come from religious backgrounds, but they kind of diluted it a little bit.
They diluted it quite a bit.
Quite a bit. Do they come from do they have a kosher house?
My parents did not keep a kosher
They
house.
did not
My
keep-
father wanted to, but it was too much trouble for my mother, so he gave in. They didn't have a fight about it. They never had a fight, but it wasn't all that important.
So, and what about, okay, so you are born in 1926.
24.
Excuse me, in 1924.
Right.
And you are born in Berlin.
In Berlin.
During the Weimar Republic.
Right.
Right? After the First World War.
In between the First World War and the Second.
And the Second World War
Right.
and the Weimar Republic. Berlin, when you're born in Berlin, Berlin is kind of recovering from the war, and it's kind of starting to boom a little bit, I think.
It was a time of very difficult, although my parents were doing all right.
Sure.
My parents and my uncle and aunt, the ones whom we came to join in Berlin, were also doing all right. But what happened was my father had 12 brothers. No, they were 12 children altogether. And some of his brothers, and they were spread all over the world.
Okay.
And one brother was in America. And what business was he taking? I forgot already. They had so many different branches of this business, and they were all partners, but they were never partners officially on paper. So since my father was what they call a freier, and he always gave in, well, that'll come later. In any case, when the brother in Chicago, he was living in Chicago, he got sick and he died. My father came to Chicago to see one about the business and to see about the widow. And he had two children to see.
To take care.
To take care. And then he wrote to us, come, it'll be better for us in America than in Germany. And I'm taking over the branch of this brother who died.
What year is this?
We came there in 27.
Wow. So you really...
Yeah.
Okay, so you
In
guys...
27, we came to the States. I was 3 years old.
To Chicago.
No, we came to New York. He moved it to
Okay.
to New York.
And what was that business, just out of curiosity?
Who?
What was the business that your father took over from his brother?
Well, I don't know exactly what he took over. Perhaps he sold it and used the money. In any case, he and another brother went into a business of movie houses in New York.
Okay.
They didn't make movies. They
No,
owned
movie
movie
houses,
houses,
yeah.
you know. And that was the business that they were working in the States. And then in 1929, you know what happened. And the business was going very bad. It's no wonder I'm a Zionist, you see.
Okay, okay.
The business was, the two brothers and the widow of the brother who had died could not make a living. The three families could not make a living. At least the kind of living they wanted to have. And my father, as I said, my father was the Freier. I don't know how you say Freier in English.
English, the sucker.
The sucker, right? Even though he had the largest amount of children, he decided that he would look for a place to live, because if he moved out, maybe the other two families could manage with the movie houses. And he began looking, and it was already 34. Hitler was already in power. And he started traveling in the world to see all his brothers.
Your father.
My father, which would be a good place for us to come. Of course, he preferred to come here. He wanted to come here.
Really?
Yes, he was a big Zionist, my father. He was not religiously motivated, but he was very, very much a Zionist.
Modern Zionism. I mean,
yes.
Herzl, all that, yeah.
Right. And he wanted to come to Israel, and the business in Israel was Faudem. I told you that. I think it's a fairly typical Jewish story, by the way. I don't know. Anyway.
Orchards.
Mm-hmm.
Orchards.
Yeah, Faudem, the
orchards.
Orchards, right. Citrus orchard.
Okay, citrus,
orchard,
yeah.
Right. And when he came here, my uncle told him that, his brother, my uncle told him that they could barely make a living on the Faudem. So that was out of the question. And in Germany was out of the question in 34. And one brother was living in Riga, in Latvia. And his business was chemicals. He had two factories. One was chemicals, and the other was yeast, production of yeast. And he wrote to my father, come to Riga. There's a place for you here, we'll manage. So the family moved. My brother remained. He was already 16, and they didn't want to stop his schooling. So he remained in the States. My parents paid a family of a friend of his, so that he could stay with them. And then he went on to college. He was there for 2 years, graduated high school and went on to college. So he didn't come with us.
So what year did you guys go to Riga?
We got to Riga in 34. I was 10 years old. And we were only going to stay for a year, at most 2, till things got better in them. But we stayed 5. The only time when we had no choice and we had to go, we were citizens by then, by the way.
Of the United States.
Of the United States. We were citizens. And in 39, September 39, you remember what happened then? September 39, I, who was 15 at the time, made a fuss. I'm not staying here one more minute. Hitler's going to come to Latvia, and I'm not staying here one more minute. I have to go back to America, and that's it. They sent me alone. But they managed to get out half a year later. In September 39, I got on a plane. Oh, actually, not completely alone, because my aunt was also leaving, this brother and his wife, and my cousin. So my two cousins, and myself and my aunt left for the States. And about half a year later, my parents arrived. But while I was in Riga...
I want to talk,
yeah.
There's a lot of things here that I need to fill in. So
okay.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop you here and I'm going to start asking you some questions.
Okay.
So, in 1927, you guys moved to New York.
Right.
Your father starts running cinemas, basically.
Right, together with
movie
his
houses
brother.
with his brother.
With his brother.
Situation, and then, so where are you guys living in New York at this time? In Brooklyn?
At the beginning in Brooklyn, near Prospect Park.
Huh?
And then we moved to Manhattan. 160, no, then we lived, where did we live there? We lived further uptown.
You lived further uptown, yeah?
Further uptown, about 182nd Street. I went to George Washington High School, if you know, yes. And no, that was, you see, I'm getting mixed up too.
No, it's okay, that's
when
okay.
When we first came at the beginning, we lived 182nd Street or something like that. Also Washington Heights.
Washington Heights,
Washington Heights.
Yeah.
But I didn't go to high school then, because at the age of 10, we went back to Riga.
You went back to Riga?
We went back to Riga.
Now, when you're living in New York during the Depression,
yes.
Do you remember the Depression? Or were you too young or not
I remember very clearly the election between Roosevelt and Hoover. And I didn't know anything about politics, but they went with buttons. And I was for Hoover. And why was I for Hoover? Because he was already in, and it's not nice to kick him out. I remember that was what motivated me. I was for Hoover, and that's what I remember about the time there. And the school, I went to school.
Yeah.
And we had a good time. We played in the street.
In your household, even in Riga, even in Berlin, even in New York, what's the tone of Zionism in your house? What kind of household would you say that you come from? What can you tell me about the education that you got from your parents?
Well, for one thing, wherever I was, I had to have Hebrew lessons.
Okay.
It's very important. And the talk of having a country of our own was very, very... my father was a very, very ardent Zionist. My father was a great admirer of Jabotinsky, and he left the Zionist party when Jabotinsky made the new Zionist party, the revisionist party.
The Polshim.
He thought it was not a good idea, but his sympathies were with Jabotinsky all the time. And in Riga, when we were living in Riga, that's already, when I was a little girl, I wasn't involved much. But in Riga, I joined Beitar.
That's interesting.
First of all, Beitar was the large and important youth movement in Riga. I think that had more of an influence on the fact that my father leaned towards that direction.
And so in Riga, you joined Beitar as the youth movement?
As a youth movement,
Yeah.
I joined. I was, not when I was 10, but when I was 13. Because we stayed for 5 years. So then I became even more ardent in a desire to come here. To come to, not Israel, Palestine.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Palestine. Okay. I wanted to come to Palestine, and I wanted to go back to the States to finish school, and when the time came, to see if I could get to Palestine. And I was always urging my parents when I wanted to leave Riga, when the war broke out.
Was Riga so bad that you wanted to leave?
No, Riga was wonderful. Riga at that time, for me, was a wonderful time. It's a beautiful city. The Jews kept to themselves. We didn't have non-Jewish friends. it seemed that all the cultural life of the city was concentrated in the hands of the Jews. We went to the opera, we went to concerts. All the people we met were Jews. I went to a Jewish school, German speaking though, because I could pick a German speaking or Yiddish speaking or Latvian speaking or Russian speaking. So my father thought that it was better to know German than any of the other languages, which I'm not so sure he was right. But in any case, I learned German. And also German was easy for me because I was born in Berlin and my first language was German.
So at this age, when you're 13, you speak German, you speak English.
German, English. I know some Yiddish and some Russian because my parents spoke with one another. And I was constantly having Hebrew lessons, but I didn't when I came
Did you guys, for example, have in your house the Keren Kayemet box, the tzedakah box?
We had a Keren Tel Chai box.
Can you tell me what that is?
It's like a Keren Kayemet, only it says Keren Tel Chai.
Keren Tel Chai.
Keren Tel Chai. And the money that went into that box went to the Moshavim and the places where the Beitarim in Eretz Israel.
I want you to tell me about Beitar and Riga. I want you to try. This is something that I want to open up, and I want you to try and explain it.
Well, I was a child, but I was certainly brainwashed, and I loved it. I loved it. It was a youth movement. We went on tiyulim. We had friends, and we spoke with such love about the country that we will one day have. And we were so optimistic that we will have it. And we listened to all of Jabotinsky's speeches, and we read all his books. And, but we were kids. And it was, I remember when I left to go back to America, I had a little party with my girlfriends, with whom who were in my group, and we all wrote down, everybody wrote down, they gave me a little locket, and we all wrote down that we were going to meet after the war. I think we set a date. We were going to meet on Allenby Street at this and this number after the war, all of us. And I remember keeping that little thing with me, and I think I still have the locket. In any case, we were going to go and we were going to be there and they were going to make it. They didn't make it. I made it. Not the date that we had set up, but they didn't make it.
Did any of those girls survive? Did any of those girls survive, to your knowledge?
I found one in Israel. She wasn't particularly the best friend, my best friend, and our madrich survived. And that
Your
was
madrich?
The madrich survived.
Do you remember the madrich's name?
Gordon, Yaakov Gordon. Yasha, we called him. Yasha Gordon.
Yasha.
Yes, and I had a terrible crush on him. I remember that. As he says, that's why I looked up. He survived, but I didn't meet him. He was living somewhere else, and I was involved with other things.
And of course, your father was probably happy that you were going to Beitar.
Very happy that I was going to Beitar.
Yeah.
I didn't go to Beitar because of my father. I went to Beitar because that was the movement in Riga.
That was the dominant one.
The dominant movement in Riga.
Okay.
Every second Jewish kid was a Beitari or a Beitaria. And it was very exciting. And I didn't want to leave, but I felt that we had to get out of there. And that if I went, my parents would come soon afterwards.
In 1939, when the war breaks out, you are already 15 years old.
15.
15, is that correct?
15.
So you're no child. You're a young adult. You understand what's happening.
I understood very well what was happening.
Do you remember?
Because I was a very serious kid.
Were you? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I knew what was happening. We all knew what was happening, but you want to save the business a little bit. You want to stay a little bit longer. It's not good in America. The depression has not yet...
America's recovered by 1939.
It began to recover.
Yeah, it began to recover.
Because of the war.
Well, yeah, the war boomed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we have wars.
Maybe.
I don't know.
That you're not the first person to say that, you know.
In any case...
So you convinced your parents to send you back to America alone with your aunt?
Because I was driving them crazy.
Were you really,
Yes.
like, really driving them crazy?
Yes. I was driving them crazy. We can't stay here, it's impossible. We are citizens, we can get out. Jerry, my brother, Jerry is there. I came and I stayed with my aunt, the one that I came with till my parents arrived. And
I want to go back just a little bit.
yeah.
Kristallnacht, you remember when this happened? You guys were in Riga probably.
Nothing happened in Riga.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
But of course we heard about it, and we knew about it. And we also read books about things, what was happening in Germany. But then it was just happening in Germany. There was not yet any...
Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, and then...
Yeah. And at the beginning, you know, the way the war started, there was a patch between Ribbentrop and Molotov. And that's why my parents weren't so anxious to get out right away. So we're going to wait a while because
they thought the pact would stick.
Yes, but it didn't. And the Russians arrived in Riga first. And then when the pact failed, it was obvious that the Germans were coming in. And at that period that my parents got out.
So your parents were still in Riga when the Soviets occupied?
Yes.
Did they suffer any from them? Did they...
Well, in any case, my father was liquidating the business already because he knew that he had to get out. It was just a matter of time. So, no, we decided, that was when they decided that they have to go as soon as possible, no matter what, they have to go back. First of all, my brother and I were there. And so my parents and my sister,
they didn't have any trouble getting out?
They had trouble getting out, but they were American citizens. Their boat, what you did, the way we went, we flew to Sweden. I mean, that's what I did, and they did.
From Riga to Sweden?
From Riga we flew to Sweden. And in Sweden, we took a boat, a ship, the Drottningholm was the one that I came on. They also came on the Drottningholm to the States.
So how come it was easy, tell me about how it was hard for your parents to get out of Riga. Did they get out before the Germans came?
They got out before the Germans came, but they decided for some reason not to fly to Sweden, but to take a ferry. It's not very far, you know,
the Baltic.
The Baltic Sea. And the ferry was intercepted during the
by the Germans.
By the Germans, and my parents, everyone was taken into custody. All the Jews. There were only Jews on the ferry. All the Jews were taken into custody, but my father was born in Germany. He was born in Lita, but Lithuania, on the border. But the actual town where my mother gave birth was in Germany. Where my grandmother gave birth was in Germany. So my father was born in Germany, and my sister was born in Germany. So they only took the Jews who were not born in Germany. The Jews who were born in Germany and they had a visa to go somewhere, and we were citizens, were left on the boat. And then they got to Sweden, and then they took the Drottningholm from, you forget words. It'll come to me. Not from Stockholm. We had to take a train to this...
Malmö?
No.
Malmö?
No.
Gothenburg?
No.
Okay.
It's on the tip of my tongue, but I
that's
don't
fine.
remember. Anyway, but I do remember the name of the boat. So they were able to get out, and I didn't know this whole story till they arrived, thank goodness, because I would have been terribly worried.
So your parents arrived back in New York.
Arrived back in New York. And then we lived on 168th Street, also in Washington Heights, but not that far uptown.
Okay.
And
Washington Heights is pretty uptown.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
The school was about 190th Street.
So you're back in the States. You and your whole family. Your brother is in college.
My brother is in Iowa.
In Iowa, going
In
to school.
Iowa, studying. No, he had just graduated. He had just graduated, and he was also living in New York with us. We had a small apartment, and my sister and I got the dining room, and my parents got the bedroom, and my brother got the living room. There was a door, so we used it as a living room, and my brother never had a real private place to be. They were difficult times. Financially, we weren't used to it because we were always financially well off. But when we came back to the States, the economic situation was worse.
What is your father doing when he's back there now? Is he trying to...
Well, one brother had remained. When my father went back to Riga, the one brother had remained. It was just that two families couldn't live on what was... So they were... No, my father didn't have work. My father did not have work. My uncle, another uncle, he happened to be my father's brother-in-law, but it doesn't matter. He owned the house that we lived in. He had prepared himself way before, buying property in the States and things like that. So he owned the house that we lived in, and he gave my father the job of being a supervisor of the house, collecting the rents and seeing to it that things get taken care of, which was a big come down for my father.
Come down, yeah.
Yes. As a matter of fact, my father died 2 years later of a heart attack. But you don't know why you get a heart attack. So, not 2 years, he died in 43. Yeah, 2 years later, 2 years later. Anyway, when we got back to America, I had only one thought in my head, to come here. Palestine, there was no Israel at the time. And how we were so involved. Oh, I looked for Beitar right away.
In New York?
In New York. My cousin, I had a cousin 2 years younger, with whom I came over. I came over with his family. And it was his father who gave my father this job of supervising the house. And he had not been in Beitar in Riga because he's younger than I am. But he was also influenced, and he and I together began searching New York for Beitar. And we found it.
Nice. Tell me about that.
We first contacted the Revision New Zionist organization, and they told us that there's a ken of Beitar in the Bronx. So my cousin and I took the subway, we went to the Bronx, and we walked in, and there were all kinds of people, and someone said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Who's in charge here?" And then some guy came over to us and said, "I am Mendel from Bialystok." We said, "We are, whoever we are, from Riga, but we're now living here, and we're Beitarim from there." We were welcomed with open arms, and we became very active there, both of us. And when my sister arrived, she joined us too. But I was even arrested at the age of not quite 16, 15 and a half, I was arrested because we boycotted the British embassy after the white paper. And I think it was a policeman stopped us, and they let everyone go, but there was another girl and myself who looked kind of young, and they asked us our age, and we were under 16, so they took us into juvenile court. And my father had to come the next day to get me out. But I was very proud of that. He was too. He argued, my father, he argued there with the
judge?
With the judge. The judge was telling him, you don't have to do it that way. You can believe in something, but you don't have to do that. And you have to act like Judge Brandeis. Remember Brandeis? That's how you have to act, and not. And my father said, yes, yes, yes. But when we walked out, I remember him giving me a clap on the shoulder and saying, good work.
So you spent the night in juvenile?
I spent the night there, and I went to school there. And when we arrived, they put us into a classroom. And girls, it was the girls section. And I asked, what are you in for, theft or prostitution? We said, no, we're in for picketing. They didn't know what we were talking about. Anyway.
So, and how long were you did you keep on being active in Beitar?
I kept on being active in Beitar till I went to college.
Okay, well that's a long commute from Manhattan to the Bronx.
Yes.
Right, the Bronx you said you found a Ken?
The Bronx, the West Bronx.
West Bronx.
West Bronx wasn't so bad. As a matter of fact, Friday night, we always had a Erev Shabbat Friday night, and a Pula on Shabbat, or a Motzei Shabbat, and in the middle of the week also. But we took the subway, but at one point there I had a boyfriend who was religious, and לא היה לי נעים to drive back home on Friday night. So we walked. He walked me. He would walk me home, and then he would say goodbye at the door and walk all the way back. He would arrive home at dawn, and all he did was walk back and forth. But that was a long time. It was a long time ago.
And during the war years, during 1939, we said you're 15, so 15, 16, 17, 18, all of high school.
High school.
You're involved in Beitar until you go to college.
I'm involved in Beitar.
You're involved in Beitar. Do you identify with their politics, with their doctrine?
Everything.
Everything. Of course,
I was a madricha, and I read, and I explained, and I have pictures where I'm standing there in front of doing targilei seder, and I'm the mefakedet. Anyway.
And were there a lot of people in Beitar in
it
the
was
Bronx?
not a large, no. Habonim was a large movement.
Habonim.
Yes, and
but
Shomer
Habonim and Masada probably also.
When I was there,
Judea.
it was mostly Habonim and some Shomer Tzair.
Shomer Tzair.
And Beitar. Beitar was the smallest.
But Shomer Tzair and Beitar was like, you wanted to keep them away from each other.
Well, it was all right. When I got to college, I made friends with every Zionist there, and I didn't care if it was Beitar or Shomer Tzair or anything else.
Okay, we're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah.
As far as world events, in 1941, America joins the war, is forced to join the war.
I was in the library listening to a concert when Pearl Harbor was announced on the radio. It was a Sunday. The library, I went to Cornell, and that was not at home. It was
you went to Cornell Library?
At the library at Cornell.
You were still in high school?
At the university.
You were still in high school?
No, in
41.
It was 42.
December 41, yeah, almost 42.
Yes. So I was in college already.
Really? What age did you finish?
No, I was a freshman.
Yeah?
I remember hearing it in the library when they used to have concerts in the library at Willard Straight Hall of Cornell. And I was a freshman, and it was a Sunday, and I went to listen to the concert, and the radio stopped. The music stopped, and that was the announcement. I was definitely there. My first year there.
You,
I was 17. Yeah, I was 17.
17, yeah.
Yeah.
42, 24, yeah.
Yeah.
And you started studying in Cornell. Is that correct?
Well, my aim, it was very, very funny. The big aim, the big dream of my life was to come to Palestine. At that time, no Palestine yet, but that was what I wanted to do. And therefore, I wanted to study agriculture, because that's what you do. Also, I liked science. I mean, it wasn't something that I hated. Although I was brought up in the city, and anyway, so I went to the Cornell Agricultural School. I got a scholarship because my parents couldn't afford tuition. But I got a scholarship because they had state boards. I don't know if you remember. You don't remember, you're much too young. But we had state boards on the basis of which you could get scholarships. And I also worked there. I didn't live in the dormitory. I lived in people's houses and took care of their children, cleaned and stuff like that, which also was a difficult thing for my father. But in my freshman or sophomore year, my father died, had a heart attack. And my brother at that time was in the Navy.
Do you think he died of a broken heart?
Well, maybe. Maybe. That was a very difficult time. But I was away, and I was involved in my studies and in the social life of Cornell.
Tell me, Cornell is located where exactly? It's
Ithaca,
upstate?
New York.
Upstate.
Ithaca.
Ithaca.
Yeah, a beautiful, beautiful
Yeah,
spot.
except in the winter, you don't want to be there.
Well, I didn't live on campus, I lived off campus,
Okay.
and I had to get to school, so I bought a ski outfit, so I could walk, and boots and everything.
Sure,
so I could walk. And then I got into trouble because I came into class wearing trousers and not a skirt. And I was taken to the Dean of Women, and I explained why I came with the pants. Why I couldn't walk from Trip Hammer Road, that's where I lived, in the snow with a skirt. I would have frozen to death. So it was accepted.
Okay. Now tell me about Cornell, the Jewish life in Cornell during the war. Tell me like the campus life and.
We had the Hillel organization. They still have Hillel, I think.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we were very, very active. And that's where I met my husband.
Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah, and we were very active in Hillel, and we. Our friends, I actually had some non-Jewish friends also, because in that long walk to school, there was another girl who was not Jewish, who was doing the same thing in a different professor's house. So we would walk together in the morning. And in the agricultural school, they were all going, not all, but mostly. I remember one of the boys in my lab asked me out. I said, "Oh no, I can't go." And he said, "Why not?" Because we were very friendly during class. "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm Jewish." She said, "Well, I'm not asking you to marry me, just to go to a movie." But I wouldn't. And my husband had a similar experience when he was going with a girl who was not Jewish, and he didn't know. Her last name was Newman, and he didn't know. And then she invited him to the Newman Club, and he didn't know what that was, and he went. When he saw that was what that was, he told me later, I dropped her like a hot potato.
So you're in Cornell during the war.
Yes.
Second part of the war, probably something like that.
Yes.
Most women your age that I've interviewed always wanted to be nurses.
But I wanted to be a farmer.
Exactly.
I wanted to be a farmer here.
Yes.
And live on a kibbutz. How that connected with my Vayter upbringing, I don't know, but I was so attracted to the idea of living on a kibbutz and being a farmer. And I thought, I have this education, I'll surely...
Absolutely.
Yes.
Tell me about The Jewish campus life on Cornell, it was an active one. It was
very, very active and very Zionist. Very, very Zionist.
And Hillel was the most dominant body there?
Hillel, and we also formed, as part of Hillel, a Zionist organization. But the Zionist organization had in it people who were in Beitar, people who were in Shomer HaTzair, people who were in Habonim, people who were in the Bund, my husband, for example. It didn't make any difference. We were all Jewish, and we were all very concerned about what was happening in Europe. Although even there, we didn't really know.
Of course.
We didn't really know when the camps were liberated and the pictures. I mean, we sort of known.
Yeah.
We didn't really know. And when we knew, also we, hakrasha, how do you say that in English?
Denial.
Denial. Couldn't be. I don't know.
Tell me about your husband. You meet your husband in Cornell, is that correct?
I met my husband in Cornell. My husband's parents had...
What was your husband's name?
Well, he was born Moshe, but when he was in school, he became Matt, M-A-T. Matt Wiener. His parents called him Moshe.
Yeah. And where was Matt? Where was he born?
In New York.
In New York.
New York. Yeah. His parents came over much earlier. They came from Poland, and in Poland they had belonged to the Bund, and they were very anti-religious. As I said, we weren't religious, but we were not anti-religious. But his family was anti-religious. They didn't give him a Brit Milah, and they didn't give him a Bar Mitzvah.
Wow.
But at the age of 6, he went at the beginning, he went to a Yiddish kindergarten, Yiddish-speaking kindergarten. And his parents were like Yiddishistim. You know what Yiddishistim are? Believed that Yiddish is the language of the Jewish people, not Hebrew.
Okay.
Anti-Zionist, anti-religious and anti-Zionist, and very pro-communist. So he knew only Yiddish at the beginning, he didn't know any English. But all the other little boys in kindergarten had a Brit Milah, and he didn't. So he got very upset, and he said, why am I different from the other boys? So at the age of 6, they gave him a Brit Milah. They gave him a circumcision. It happens. He wasn't the only one. That was the chug that they were...
And your husband, you meet Matt in Cornell?
We met in Cornell. And everyone I met, I began trying to convince them to be a Zionist. Not only a Zionist, to be a Beitar type of Zionist. So I also, when I met him, I did the same thing. Instead of dancing, I said, come, let's talk. Anyway, something developed there. And slowly, especially with the news coming out of Europe, he changed his orientation to wanting to come to Israel and to be a Zionist. And
how did his parents take that?
Well, some of the people in his house had married non-Jews.
Yeah, but that's fine in his house.
Well...
Anti-religious, what do they care if they're Jewish or not Jewish?
Well, they did.
They did?
Yes. No, they liked me, I think. In any case, what happened was that he got a notice from the draft board.
Wait, so he's a doctor? He's in medical school?
He's a dentist.
He's a dentist, right?
But
a dentist.
When I met him, he was doing pre-med.
Pre-med, okay.
Pre-med. I was in the ag school, the agricultural school, and he was in pre-med, and we met in Hillel.
At the Hillel house. At the Hillel house.
At the Hillel house. And then he became president of Hillel, and I was vice president of Hillel. So, then he was trying to get into medical school, but you really had to graduate first. It was hard to get in if you had not yet graduated. And he wasn't getting in, So he figured as soon as he graduates college, the army will take him. And then in the last minute, he was accepted at dental school.
At Cornell?
No, New York University,
NYU.
NYU Dental School. And so he got deferment from the army.
The army said to him, okay, go study, right?
Right,
the army let him out.
Yes. Deferment, when you finish, you'll be in the army.
What year is this? Do you remember? Is the war over now, or is it still going on?
The war is still going on. It's towards the end. February 44.
February 44.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The war was still going on.
Yeah.
We had a conflict there. Should he go or should he not go? Because
To the army, or should he go to school or go into the army?
Exactly.
And you, at this time, you guys are already dating. You're like,
at this time we were thinking of getting married because we thought that we were very young, we were 19. We thought that if he goes into the army now, we have to make up our minds whether we wait or whether we get married then. In those days it was different than it is today. You can't live together, you can't form a real, I know that all my granddaughters, they're all living with their boyfriends and
it's a different time.
I don't know whether they ever get married or whether they will or whether they'll get pregnant first and then decide, I don't know.
Different times.
It was different times,
Yeah.
but we had to make up our minds whether we wanted to be a family before the war or wait till after the war. And we went to consult with the Hillel director. His name was Shapiro, a very nice man. We went to consult with him. What does he think? He was a rabbi, a conservative rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
And we were very, very friendly with him because we were the president and the vice president.
And you trust his opinion, so.
Right. And
you respect his opinion.
He said he knows us well, and he thinks that we don't have to wait, that we would make it even if we got married earlier.
So when did you get married?
We got married February 44.
February 1944.
44. And then after that, he was accepted into medical school. So there really would have been no need to get married.
Yeah, well.
But,
and where do you guys get married? In New York?
In New York. We got married in my parents' house with very few people because we came home in between terms. In America, the spring vacation is in February. It's in between terms, before you begin the second term. And we came home. And we said, we have 2 weeks and we're getting married.
Wow.
They were in terrible shock. My father was no longer living. My mother said, how can you get married with what's going on in Europe? We said, well, we're not having a party. We just want to get married. His parents were devastated because you have to have a big wedding. First of all, he's too young. He was 19 and a half, 19. Both of us were 19. You're crazy, and you're this, and you're that. And we said, well, when they saw that there was nothing, they said, okay, you'll get married, but we're not having a party. We'll have the party later when we have time to arrange a party. I think they suspected that maybe I was pregnant, because that's why we were, but it was not so. In any case, we got married in my parents' house with just a minion and whatever cousins or relatives happened to have been.
And his parents were there, I'm sure, no?
My mother, only my mother. My
no,
father,
and his parents.
His parents came and his brother, but not a single relative. Nobody. They were very upset. But then we got a letter around Pesach time, approximately. A little before, I don't remember the exact date, we got a letter from them or a phone call. No, not even a phone call. Everything was done by letter then because we didn't have a phone.
Right. Who did you get a letter from?
From his parents, that they're making a big party for us because we're married. Can't have a chuppah, but you can have a party. And that we have to be in New York on this and this day. And we have to come 2 days earlier so that they can get the proper clothes for us. And we came in 2 days earlier, and they already had a tuxedo for my husband, all bought, and a dress for me, but it didn't fit properly. So the whole night before the party, my father-in-law, who was a tailor, fixed the dress so it should fit well. And then we had a big party. My mother came reluctantly because all her sisters refused to come. Because they said you don't make a party when they're killing Jews and... But we had a party.
It was obvious then what was happening with the Jews in Europe.
More or less.
More or less.
More or less, yeah. Yeah.
So when you guys get married, you guys are still both studying at Cornell.
He
finished pre-med.
He finished pre-med and immediately...
What about you? What about your studies?
Well, I took the last year and put it into half a year. I took double credits.
Wow.
And I stayed there, and he began dental school at NYU. And...
so he's in the city and you're upstate.
Right. And we would meet every other weekend. He came up. He came up every other weekend. And it was half a year. Actually 4 months. It turned out 4 months. Not that bad.
No.
And then I came back to New York and I began to work.
So you finished school.
Finished school.
What's your degree?
Well, then I got a
BA?
Bachelor of Science.
BS.
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 But I went on for an MS later.
Master of Science.
Yes. Later. At Columbia.
At Columbia.
Yeah, because we were already living in New York, and
this is after Israel. After you came here in '48.
No.
Before.
This was before. We went to New York in '45. We came to New York, and I got a job.
Where were you working?
I was working in a chemical plant.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then I decided I wanted to get a master's degree because I had to wait for him to finish dental school anyway.
Right. Columbia?
At Columbia.
You got accepted at Columbia?
In botany.
You're going to like Ivy League schools. You're going to Cornell, you're going to Columbia. This is like...
And NYU.
NYU.
Yeah. Okay. But we're
Impressive.
here. But we're here.
I understand. But I want to ask you a question. Do you and Matt know at this time that you guys are going to end up in Palestine/Israel? Do you guys talk about it? Are you guys on the same page?
Yes, because he was convinced. I'm not saying that I did it, but the entire experience there and everything. He was convinced. Even his parents began to see the light. How could you not? How could you not with what was going on?
So are you saying that the Holocaust had a big influence on you wanting to come to Palestine? But even before the Holocaust, you wanted to come to Palestine?
No, I wanted to come since I was 15, 14, 13, I don't know.
But the Holocaust just sharpened it, made it stronger.
Right. No, but it was very strong even before. All this business about studying agriculture. I mean, I could have studied medicine, or I could have studied philosophy. I could have studied anything.
Is that what you would have wanted to study? Philosophy or medicine or history or?
I thought of medicine. I thought of history also.
Maybe in the arts. No.
But I didn't. It was obvious that what I wanted was to go to an agricultural school, and that was the agricultural school in New York at Cornell.
At Cornell, yeah.
At Cornell.
So, you decide to do a Master's of Science at Columbia University.
At Columbia University in botany.
Botany?
Botany. The study of plants. Botany. Botanica. Botanica. Botany. Yes.
Where are you guys living?
We rented an apartment on 3rd Avenue under the L. Remember? You don't remember, but there was...
The L train?
Yeah, no, the elevated. No. 3rd Avenue had an elevated train. How old are you?
I'm 40.
You're very young. You're very young. You're younger, much younger then my youngest child is 56 or 7 already. I don't remember.
So you're living on 3rd Avenue?
We were living on 3rd Avenue under the L. The 3rd Avenue was the street of the bars and the drunks, and it was a very bad neighborhood. And
what street line? So you're on 3rd Avenue?
No, we were on 25th Street.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. So you're actually not that far from...
No, we were on 3rd Avenue, in between 25th and 26th Street.
Okay, so you're near the Flatiron Building.
We're also very near to the New York Dental School, to the Columbia Dental School, NYU Dental School.
Okay.
And that was the reason that we looked there.
And that neighborhood was very sketchy at the time?
The neighborhood,
You don't know. You don't... Because you have quite a journey to Columbia from there. You got to go...
I took the train. Yeah, I know, but it went fast in the subway.
Yeah.
It went fast in the subway.
How was New York in those days? In those days of post-World War II? 45, 46?
I loved New York. I mean, I wanted to come here, but I loved New York because there wasn't a thing you could think of that you couldn't find. It was like a special feeling about New York, even living where we lived. And we'd get up in the morning on Sunday. I keep forgetting now, there's no Sunday. But we would walk to Central Park and take walks in Central Park. And it was so beautiful. We saw the seasons changing, and it was nice. My sister was there, my mother was there. And
where's your brother? Is he still in the Navy, or is he...
my brother, meanwhile, had finished the Navy and had begun working in, I told you, at that time the business was east. And my uncle, since he was a chemical engineer, took him into the east plant, and he began to work there. And then a while after, he got a master's there in Brooklyn Polytech.
Mm-hmm.
Brooklyn Polytech, he got a master's, and then he decided to open his own business in California. And from the Atlantic East Corporation, he created the Pacific East Corporation in Bakersfield, California.
Sure, I know Bakersfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he did very well. He became a multimillionaire.
Wow.
Which is, I never did, and neither did my sister, but so.
Were you guys close with your brother, or was he somewhere else?
My sister and I were very close. My brother was away, and no, we had a good relationship, though. We had a good relationship.
In New York, after the war,
Yeah.
46, 47, 45, 46, 47, even 48.
Well, in 47 we stayed up all night, of course.
We're going to get to that, to the Kaftet Ben November, right?
Right.
We're going to get to that.
Right.
There's a lot of activity going on in New York City as far as weapons smuggling to Palestine.
I know.
Were you involved in any of this?
No. Because we had just gotten married, he was studying dentistry. I knew that we were going to come, and I was getting a master's, and I also had to work because we had to support ourselves. So I got a job teaching at Rutgers in New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
They had a SNF, how do you say SNF?
A branch.
A branch in Newark.
Of what?
Of the University of Rutgers.
Okay.
In Newark. The branch was in Newark. And I traveled to Newark every day.
So you're just too busy.
Hmm? Yeah,
you were busy. Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, at this time, you know, what's the game plan with you and your husband? Finish the studies and go to Palestine?
Immediately.
Immediately. That's the game plan.
Yes. But by then, of course, the war was on.
Well, now the Second World War ended and another war started.
Right.
Now, here's a question I have to ask you. You're living in New York, post-World War II. In Palestine, in 1946, there's a period that's happening here now. But because I'm asking you this question because I know that you're more affiliated to Beitar.
Yeah.
There's a huge rift between Beitar and Ben Gurion.
I know.
Do you know about any of this at the
I
time?
knew about it and I supported it in my heart very much. It was okay. It was good.
What was good?
The killing of Bernadette,
For
the
example?
bombing of the
King David.
of the King David. It was good. They tried not to kill anybody, and we had to get the British out. It was terribly important, and even in retrospect, I think it was important.
So deep down,
even in retrospect.
Sure. And do you know about? I mean,
about the Irgun, I knew about the
yeah,
Etzel.
I'm sure you know about the
Yes,
Etzel,
yes.
and Menachem Begin.
Yes.
Right?
Right. And I'll tell you something else interesting.
Please.
In 1940, or was it 41? 40, we were at Camp Beitar in the summer, my sister and I, and Jabotinsky was in New York. By the way, I heard him speak in New York.
You have to tell me about
At
this.
Manhattan Center. I have a picture.
Can you show me the picture?
If it's
Not
in
now,
there,
not now.
Okay.
Wait, this is interesting. So tell me
Yeah.
the story. That you're
So-
at Camp Beitar.
We're at Camp Beitar, and Rosh Beitar, Jabotinsky came to visit, no thank you, came to visit. And we were all very excited, and we prepared, put on our uniforms. We did not have a brown shirt in New York. In New York, we had a khaki-colored shirt. In Europe, in Riga, we had brown shirts.
Why not in the States?
Because we realized, first of all, we were told by our leaders, here in the States we have
Light brown.
different,
Yeah.
like the soldiers wore, with all
Yeah.
the insignia,
Yeah.
with everything, slacks and skirts, and
So Jabotinsky comes.
then Jabotinsky came and talked in Manhattan Center, New York. I don't know if Manhattan Center still exists, but this is where people who gave speeches, there were also performances. Manhattan Center, Jabotinsky came and gave a speech in English. He knew every language under the sun.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to answer, they'll leave a message. I'll pick it up and put it down.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. And we were an honor guard. The Betarim, over the age of, I don't know, I was not yet 16. Maybe over the age of 40, not the children anyway.
But the young adults.
Yeah, the young adults.
14 to 16.
Yes. We had sort of we were standing there on the stage, standing as Dom or Noach, whatever was necessary, and he spoke. He came and he spoke at Manhattan Center.
Go answer. We'll stop. Wait a sec. Wait. Tell me the story from the beginning, because we stopped. Tell me the story from the beginning about Jabotinsky, about this.
Yeah.
Okay?
I think my parents were not yet in the States. It was the beginning of 40. Jabotinsky came to New York, and we were in Beitar. I had just found Beitar with my cousin, and that's it. My cousin was not on that lineup because he was still a little boy. Anyway, we came to be like the guard, the military guard of Jabotinsky. There were about 10 of us, and he came and he spoke. The hall was full to capacity. You have no idea. People were standing in the aisles.
And it was at a place called?
Manhattan Center. At that time, this was the place when you came to make a speech where you did it.
Was it like a Carnegie Hall kind of thing, place?
Uh,
Lincoln Center? Whatever.
well, it
I'll
wasn't
check-
so well known for concerts. Carnegie Hall was mostly concerts.
Concerts, yeah.
But this was...
Tell me more
Yeah.
what you remember
So-
more of this.
So if I had not been convinced that this was the way to live, and this was the right way, and this was the right approach, I certainly, it was so impressive, it was so wonderful. That speech, you have absolutely no idea. He was a fantastic speaker, and he made such sense. And he spoke in English.
He spoke many languages.
He spoke Russian, he spoke Yiddish, he spoke Hebrew,
French.
he spoke English, he spoke French. He made a fantastic impact.
What do you remember from that evening? Did you meet him?
We met him again, and then, I mean, he saw us.
Yeah.
He inspected the line, you know, like in the army. He inspected. I think he shook hands with each of us, but I didn't meet him personally. But then, that summer, he came to visit the camp, Camp Beitar. He was going to be there for a few days. And again, we had a mizdar, we called it. We had a mizdar, and we got all dressed up, and we stood, and he came, and he talked, and we were just so excited. And then he went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, they woke us. He had a heart attack. Yes, we were there. We were there when he had a heart attack. He was 60 years old. We thought of him as being an old man. At that time, I thought 60 was an old man. I'm 90 now.
92.
Huh? 91.
91.
91.
You were there when he died.
I was there when he died. They woke us up. We took turns standing shmirah outside his room. And the next day, we all went to New York to the funeral. We were there at the funeral. So how could I not have come?
So you saw Jabotinsky the night before he died.
Right? He inspected us. It was a heart attack. It was sudden. He inspected us. He talked to us. And we were
was he a nice person? Was he
very.
Was he warm or was he distant? Because normally
No.
people like that could be very.
He was warm, and he was so educated. He was such a cultured person, really.
Well, he was a writer and he wrote poems.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we were just. At the funeral, everybody was crying. I remember my father died half a year later, or maybe a year later, I don't know. My father died, a year later. I don't remember crying at my father's funeral as much as I cried at that funeral. Because this was our God. I was 16. I sometimes think if he were alive, things would have turned out differently for us. He and Ben-Gurion were at terrible odds with one another. It was very bad. And Ben-Gurion wouldn't allow him to be buried here. I mean...
Can you believe that?
Well, I was here, I know. Afterwards he
Levi
was buried.
Eshkol. Levi Eshkol
Yes,
permitted it.
Right.
It's amazing. His successor, of course, we all know was Begin.
Begin was different.
Yeah, no, I know.
Begin was a completely different...
I agree, but what I'm saying is that Ben-Gurion kept the hate that he had for Jabotinsky, he kept it just with Begin the same way. He hated him.
Yes.
And he, tried to sideline him as much as possible.
Yes.
Not out of ideology, but out of hate.
Right.
And
right.
it's...
Well, Jabotinsky was a real threat to him because he was, they were both very strong and very bright and very intelligent. I mean, Ben-Gurion really did a wonderful thing that he had the courage to declare the state. But I'm sure Jabotinsky would have too if he had been alive. I'm positive of it.
So you remember his funeral in New York? You were there.
I was at the funeral. I was at camp the day that he died. I mean, those are the those aren't really the big moments of my life, but...
And they woke you up in the middle of the night to guard the room? To guard the room or outside?
Yes.
Not inside, but outside.
Outside.
Yeah.
Not just me, you know, we took turns.
Yeah.
We took turns.
Yeah.
Again, not my cousin. Interesting, because my cousin later became an important person in Israel.
Who's your cousin?
His name is Moshe Arens.
Wait a minute. So this little cousin that you're telling me about?
He's only a year and a half younger than I am, but when I'm 15 and he's 13, he's a boy and I'm a girl, he's a little cousin, right? But we were good friends.
Couldn't you tell me that this was your little cousin that you were talking about?
I didn't know if you knew him.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah. Well. I told you I had nothing to say, huh? I guess I have a lot to say. Wait a second.
Okay, you want to go to the bathroom?
Turn it off first. Beitar, if it weren't for me.
What do you mean?
He was this little boy, and I was looking for Beitar, and he was a stranger in New York, and we went together, and so I introduced him to Beitar. He didn't know at that age much.
He didn't know.
He was 13.
He didn't. It didn't come from his family.
Not his family. It was my father. All right, my father had an influence on him too. We grew up together in Riga, not in America.
In Riga, yeah.
In Riga, we grew up together. The families were very close, and my father had a great influence on me and on him.
On Moshe.
And Moshe and my sister. Not my brother.
No. And Moshe so Moshe Arens is related to you through his mother and your mother were sisters?
No, his father and my mother.
His father?
Father and my mother.
Okay. I never asked you, what is your maiden name?
Sudarsky.
I want to write that down. How do you spell it?
S-U-D-A-R.
S-U-D-A-R.
S-K-Y.
S-K-Y. Sudarsky. Haviva.
Right. And his name was Arens because that was from my mother's side.
That was your mother's maiden name, Arens? Yeah?
Not Arens, Arsch.
Arsch.
And Arsch is a very not nice word in German.
No?
No. It means Tussig. So as soon as they left Poland, and not Poland, Lithuania.
Lithuania, yeah.
They changed their name to Arens.
So Moshe Arens is your first cousin.
Is my first cousin, and a good friend.
How is he doing today?
Well.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good.
Only he has 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters, and both sons live in America with their children and their wives and everything. For him, that he doesn't talk about it. He's not very.
And are you guys are still in touch, of course, and close?
Yeah, we see when they're
good.
always family.
Good.
And
I interviewed. I will get back to this your story very soon, but I interviewed a guy named Hugo Marom. He was a pilot from Czechoslovakia. Have you heard of him?
The name sounds familiar,
Okay.
but I don't know.
He was a pilot from Czechoslovakia who came here during the war and was a pilot and a Jewish guy, of course. And when in 1989, when Czechoslovakia, the communism collapsed, and Czechoslovakia immediately restored diplomatic ties with Israel, and Arens was the foreign minister.
Yes.
And Arens called Hugo and asked him to be the ambassador to Czechoslovakia. And Hugo was like, I can't do it. I'm an unformal person.
Yes.
I get drunk. I like to have a good time.
Yes.
I can't do this. Yes. And then Moshe Arens invited him to a meeting with President Havel, who came and spoke to the Knesset in 1990.
Yes.
And Arens asked Havel to convince Hugo to be the. So Havel asked Arens to leave the room, and they spoke Czech together. And Havel said, I wouldn't do it if I were you. And he didn't do it. But he told me that Moshe Ahrens really wanted him, Moshe Ahrens put some pressure, not bad pressure, but they really wanted him to be the first ambassador to Czechoslovakia.
At one point, he wanted, they had a primary, the Likud had a primary, and he was running, Misha, we call him Misha. Misha was running against Bibi, but he didn't even come close.
And he brought Bibi in.
Yes, he brought Bibi in when Bibi was a young man. He brought him in. Yeah.
Are we to thank him for that, or are we to not thank him for that? That's something that only history will tell.
I don't know.
But I want to get back. I want to get back to your story.
Yes.
That's a fascinating story about being at.
Being at the funeral and being at camp. Bishop was at camp too, and my sister. The three of us were there, but my sister and Bishop were too small to go to the funeral. They had a certain age limit, I suppose.
But you went.
I went.
Where was the funeral? In what? Do you remember? It was
in New York. I don't
New York.
remember. I don't remember.
Okay, so I want to jump ahead a few years. I want to jump ahead a few years, and I want to talk about you and Matt finishing up school and coming to Palestine.
Right.
Now, let's go to this.
Not Palestine. It was Israel.
It was Israel at the time. Well, let's go back to this date for a second.
We're back
1947, the 29th of November.
Right.
UN partitioned Palestine into two.
Right.
Arab.
Right.
Jewish.
Right.
Where are you? What's going on? School.
Well, we didn't believe it should be partitioned because we were Beitarim. However, we certainly wanted the UN vote to be positive. Because one of the things that Jabotinsky always said, that if you want a finger, ask for the whole hand. If you begin by asking for a finger, you're not going to get anything. So if you think of that, that was in one of his books or stories, I don't remember. But if you think of that, even though we wanted more than a finger.
Shtei gadot leYarden.
Yeah, right. Well, that was nobody really. That was asking for the whole hand again. But nobody took that seriously. Well, we did. As kids, we took it seriously. We did.
Yeah.
And we didn't want a partition, but we wanted the British out, and we wanted to have some sort of state. And I'm talking personally, my husband and myself. And we wanted the UN vote to be positive, to begin from there. We did not know, at least we weren't living in Israel, in America. We did not know that that such a terrible war would break out. We did not know that the Arabs would refuse. At least
so were you listening to this on the radio in New York?
Yes, on the radio.
Or were you at home, or do you remember where you were? Or
we were at home.
We were at home.
Yeah. And we were listening, and we were happy. And then immediately the war broke out. Immediately. Actually, the war was even before. And we wanted to come immediately, but there was this business. He has a little bit more to finish school. You have to wait till he finishes school, because you come with I already had my degree, but he had to have a degree, because otherwise, what do you do?
So what happens?
So we didn't come immediately. We waited for him to finish, and even before he finished, we made all the arrangements to come.
What kind of arrangements do you need to do?
Well, we tried to get a exit permit to come directly to Israel, but we couldn't get it because the government at the time, there was war here, And they wouldn't give exit visas to Israel, to the entire area, to any of the Arab states or anything around here. We couldn't get it. So we applied for an exit visa to go to France on vacation, because my husband just got his degree and his parents are sending us on a vacation to France. And we didn't know if they would accept that or not, because they were already suspecting us, because we had applied first to get an exit visa to Israel.
Yeah.
But we got it, and then it took us a very long time to get here, because first you had to wait for the boat to France, and then in France we were making arrangements with the Sochnut to get onto one of the boats that were leaving. There was the Kedma and the Negba. They were taking turns leaving from Marseille, but they weren't leaving all the time. We were in France for almost a month, which was not bad, by the way. We were there for almost a month. Also, France after the war was also something interesting to see. But
so you go from Marseille?
From Marseille, no, we were in Paris.
Right.
And we kept contacting the embassy all the time. Not yet, we'll let you know. Not yet, we'll let you know.
Wait, so Israel's already declared independence?
Yes.
Okay.
Ben Gurion has already, and the war is going on.
Do you remember what month you're in France?
I think it was August.
I think you said you arrived in July.
No, we didn't.
No, you arrived in July into Israel.
No, we
No.
arrived later.
You arrived
We
later.
arrived later. I think we left the States in July. It took us 2 months to get here.
Okay.
Because first we were 3 weeks, we had to wait for the boat, and then the boat was 5 days, and then we were in Paris, and then we kept contacting them, and at the end we finally got to Marseille, and there was a delay. We had to wait another week in Marseille, so we took a trip to the Riviera, and we finally left. I don't remember the date. It was like a refugee boat, you know. We slept in Komot. There were about
Like
four
bunk beds.
4 beds, one on top of the other. Like not double decker, but quadruple decker beds. You know, like a dormitory with.
Is this the first time you encounter refugees from the Holocaust?
Yes.
How was that? How was that?
They were okay by then. It was 48. They didn't look like the pictures that we saw, but they were disturbed.
Mentally.
Yeah. Some. And a lot of children, small children, and they were sick, seasick. Everybody was seasick. But we weren't. We decided not to be seasick, and we had an experience coming over on the Queen Elizabeth from New York to
Paris.
France.
Yeah.
So we had experience already what to do when you begin feeling seasick and so on. We didn't have pills. They didn't have pills in those days. I don't know. Now there are pills. But we controlled it somehow, and we tried to help. We tried to help the people who were sick. And I know that many wouldn't sleep in those places. They slept on the deck. And then we stopped in Marseille. The refugees were not only from Europe, but also from North Africa.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever saw a North African or a non-Ashkenazi Jew. But everybody was together. There was none of this feeling of Edot then. I don't know what happened later.
And when do you arrive in Israel?
I forgot the date exactly, sometime in September.
September.
Yeah, and while we were on the boat, the news were bad. The Castell was in the hands of the Castell was going back and forth, and this. And that I remember also when my parents came, my mother and my in-laws and my sister, families came to say goodbye to us before we left the States. I remember crying terribly, and it wasn't because I was leaving them. It was because I had a feeling inside that I'm going to my death.
Really?
Yes, because it was bad. At that time it was bad. By the time we got here, it was much more hopeful. There was a hafuga, and things were going our way. But all that happened more or less on the trip. And I remember I was suddenly fear. I had such fear. I said, what am I doing? But no, this has been my dream ever since I was a little girl, and I wouldn't. And it was. It's really a very, very wonderful thing when you, how did he say it, Martin Luther King? I have a dream. I have a dream. When you have a dream and it comes true, that doesn't happen very often. And it happened to me. It doesn't happen to my children. They were born here. Or my grandchildren, they take it all for granted. But it was such an experience, it was a long, long time ago, and I think nothing better ever happened to me in my life except that. Actually, the state being declared and coming here. And when the war was nearly over, and we saw it was going our way, it was all going to turn out good. We didn't know what was going to happen afterwards. It was all, and people, you can't imagine, they saw us on the street, they heard us speaking English, they hugged us, and they kissed us, and they thanked us, and the feeling of hope was so great, so wonderful. It was just, and right away the feeling of being at home. Immediately, they spoke Hebrew, which I hardly knew, even though my father insisted on Hebrew lessons all my life. But it was just so unbelievably wonderful. Anyway, the army came onto the boat, and they
Tell me about that.
Okay.
Okay. You dock in Haifa?
In Haifa. And you should have seen all the people when they were approaching.
September, right? September 48?
September 48. When the people were when the boat was approaching the city and soon will be in Haifa, the joy and the falling down and kissing the deck even, and it was an emotional experience for everybody there, whether it was North Africa or Poland or from Romania they weren't coming, from Poland. Most of them were from Poland, who had gone through God knows what. And the I don't know whether they were North Africa, which country exactly, but they got on in Marseille. Anyway, the army came onto the boat and began questioning everybody. And every male over the age of 18 was immediately inducted into the army on the boat.
On the boat?
On the boat. And they came to us and we said, Machal. And they began asking him questions. And they discovered he's a dentist. So he said, you'll be in Chel Refuah, you'll be in the medical corps, and you'll fix teeth. You come all the way to fight for this country. But he didn't even know how to hold a gun. If anything, I knew better, but they weren't taking women, married women. They weren't taking women off the boat altogether. Well, most of the women, they were married anyway. But they told us to report in Tel Aviv at a certain date. They gave us a few days.
Where in Tel Aviv? Tel Avinsky? Or the Machal had? There was a Machal club in Tel Aviv.
No, I don't know. I don't remember what I do remember that they gave us a room. They rented us a room in somebody's house to live in Tel Aviv for a while. And he had to go. There was a hospital in Jaffa called Dejani.
Okay.
And he had to report to the Dejani hospital every day. And he was fixing teeth. without ever having had any experience except what he did in school. And I walked around, that was just for a few weeks, because then they sent us somewhere else. But I had to walk around, I didn't go to Johnny with him, but I had relatives in Tel Aviv. I walked around, I looked, I began to inquire about kibbutzim. I was all set, you know, this Beitariya who wanted to go to a kibbutz. But it didn't matter, it was here, you know. And the idea of a kibbutz was very, very appealing. It was always people have come and volunteered for years, non-Jews.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we got a summons, he got a summons that they're sending him to Zdom. And that's when he said, but what about my wife? I can't go without my wife. They said, well, she's not officially in the army, but we'll give her a uniform and she can come as your assistant. I didn't know anything about dentistry. And the uniforms were the strangest thing. They didn't match. The shirt didn't match the pants. It was, yeah. And while we were in Tel Aviv, I think about 2 weeks or 3 weeks till they sent us to Zdom. And in Tel Aviv, they gave us coupons to eat in Tenuva. So we could eat our meals in Tenuva. And what there was mostly eggplant. I had never tasted an eggplant in my life either. Bread and eggplant. Yeah. Anyway, we came, why Zdom? I don't know if you know the story of Zdom. There was a kibbutz called Bet Arava. By the way, there was a film about Bet Arava that I had seen in New York. And maybe that's what got me about a kibbutz. It was such a wonderful film. The way there was no water, and they discovered how they could grow things without water, and how they got the water from the Jordan and the fields, and then they made fish ponds in order not to waste the water. And at the beginning there were only men there, and then they decided they had to have families, and then the first woman arrived, who, by the way, I met later, that same woman. It was quite a disappointment.
So why did they send you? Why Zdom though? Why Zdom?
Why Zdom? So during the war, the northern part of the Dead Sea became occupied by the Jordanians. And they had to do something about the people living on the kibbutz, and also the people, there was the factory of Kalya there, which is now Mifalei Yam HaMelech, but then it was in the northern part. And they had to evacuate all those people. And some of them, the children, they sent north. The children of the kibbutz, they sent them to Moshav Shvaim. But the men and the unmarried women, they sent to Zdom. They sent them on little boats on the
Dead Sea.
On the Dead Sea. And in Zdom they set up a camp. There were soldiers there. It was mainly for Shmirah. There wasn't any fighting, actual fighting in Zdom, but the place had to be occupied because the northern part...
For tactical reasons?
Yes, yes.
So it was like an army base?
It was an army base.
And you guys get there, when do you guys get there? In October or something, maybe? 48? November?
Maybe beginning of November. Beginning of November, which is a good time to get to Zdom.
Yes.
And that was an experience. We had read about the Dead Sea. We knew about the Dead Sea. I had seen that film on Bet Arava. And here I am going there. It's... Ay. Anyway, so we got to Zdom. We were given a room in a tzrif. But we were very lucky because the soldiers were like 6 or 7 in a room. But here came he's a katzin, he's a rofeh.
That's right, he's an officer, right?
Yeah, so they're an officer. He had two things on his, he didn't know anything. And they didn't have an electric drill. you had something with the foot, so I had to do the footwork. By the way, there were long lines all the time. He was busy all the time. All the soldiers needed tipul. And
So you were his hygienist.
Yeah.
You were his assistant.
Yes.
Suction. There was no suction.
There was no suction. He didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. But the soldiers came out okay. He did have injections.
No Novocaine.
There was.
Oh, there was Novocaine. Okay.
We had Novocaine, but we didn't have an electric drill. We had to do it with the foot.
Like a pump, what do you call it, pompa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's okay. I remember going to the dentist in Riga, and there was a woman who treated me, and she also had this foot thing. So it wasn't so, but it was okay. And we took tiulim in the entire area, we saw the sunset, the sunrise coming up from the east. It was so different, you know, all of a sudden to be in this dome. We came on a little plane, lucky that we...
They flew you out there?
Hmm?
They flew you out there?
They flew us out there, yeah. There was no way of getting there besides flying. Took about an hour, a little over an hour, I think. And then we came from a rainy, cold day in Tel Aviv, and we step out of the plane into this desert. Yeah. And there in Zdom, we met the people of Bet HaArava. And we befriended them. And they said that they were going to set up a new kibbutz in the Galilee with a garin from Habonim. Habonim from America. A garin from American Habonim. American or Canadian. And wouldn't we join them? So we immediately said, yes, we'll join them. Of course, my husband, how did he get it? No, he had to stay on in Zdom. He had to stay on in Zdom. No, let me think. No. It was in January 1st or 2nd or 3rd of 49 when the people of Bet HaArava, by the way, Bet HaArava split. There was Mapai and Mapam, if you remember. No, not Mapai and Mapam. Mapai and Achdut Avodah.
Yeah, it was basically Stalinistic, or not like En Charod.
Like Ein Charod, what's it called? Something Yaakov.
Ashdod Yaakov.
Ashdod Yaakov, and many other places. It was also Bet HaArava. So there were, but the people, and it was already arranged that the ones who were Achdut Avodah would go to an area which later became Kibbutz Kabri. Mm-hmm. And the people from Mapai would go to a place near the sea, near Achziv, the Arab village of Achziv, which would later become Kibbutz Gesher Aziv. Mm-hmm. And we decided to go with the people who were going to Gesher Aziv, not because we liked Mapai more than we did Achdut Avodah, but because they were going together with the Garin of Americans.
Of Habonim.
Of Habonim.
And that would have been easier for you guys to assimilate.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we decided we were going with them. And that's how it happened that we were there on Yom Hityashvut of Gesher Aziv.
So you were on the first day that...
On the first...
איך שגשר הזיו עלה לקרקע, את היית שם.
אני הייתי שם. גם הוא, כי what I think happened there is they evacuated a lot of people from... At that time, they already evacuated a lot of people from Zdom. Because we back, right. Not all of them. Some had to remain. But many were already evacuated, and we came with them. But he was still in the army. I was never in the army, so I didn't have to be released. He was still in the army. And
you were the assistant.
And you know what he told
it's
the
good,
army?
because you studied agriculture to be his assistant.
Yeah, well, but I didn't want that any longer, as long as it wasn't necessary. So he told them, okay, we're being evacuated, and I'll tell you, I want to be in the north because we're joining Gesher Aziv. Well, it was not yet Gesher Aziv. We're joining a kibbutz in the Western Galilee, and my wife will be there, and that's where I want to be. So they gave me a posting in a hospital in Haifa as a soldier, and I remained at Gesher at the place which later became Gesher.
Now I want to ask you about your days in Sdom. Was there any fighting going on around there?
No, nothing. It was quiet. It was nice. It was wonderful weather. It was winter. And kef.
So you later become a member of Gesher Aziv?
Yes. We both became members of Gesher Aziv. After his posting in Haifa, they became even better. The army was very strange at the time. They posted him in Nahariya because it's closer to Gesher Aziv till his release.
How long was he in the army for altogether? About a year or two?
A year.
A year?
Yeah, over a year, a little over a year. Yeah. The war was over, and more or less over. There were still things that Rosh Hash was still not, and Fallujah, that whole business happened afterwards, and a couple of other things I don't remember. But we were there. Gesher Aziv was nothing at the time. There were
Tell me about Gesher Aziv.
It was a beautiful place, an olive orchard, really, full of olive trees. There had been a British army camp there. And there were the remains of the army camp, and we pitched tents. And everybody got tents. A married couple got a tent to themselves. So we had a tent to ourselves, but it had a hole in it. And it rained that entire winter. It rained all the time. And I remember pushing the bed around from place to place so that the rain shouldn't hit us. But it was wonderful. What can I tell you? A new experience. Not only come to a kibbutz, but establish a new kibbutz. I did. Yeah, then afterwards life became very mundane. But
sure, I understand.
That was very, very exciting.
I want to take you back to an event because I'm very interested in these things of Beitar and in July, and this is before you come to Israel. In July of 48, you're still in New York, probably leaving New York.
Not yet, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. We're still in New York.
Altalena.
We knew about it.
Yeah.
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 We knew about it. And he was finishing up. I had...
At NYU.
At NYU. He had to take state boards. He was in the midst of the state boards. And I was working very hard. I went to work as a waitress in New York on Madison Avenue because the school was over. I had been teaching at this college. School was over, and we needed money badly. So we were very preoccupied. We knew about things. And then, interesting also, it was before American elections. There were going to be elections between Truman.
Between Truman and Dewey.
And Dewey. And there was a third party.
No, not Dewey, somebody else. Dewey's 50.
Dewey.
Dewey, yeah, Dewey. Okay, Dewey, yeah.
Truman and Dewey. And there was a third party for the first time in years.
Since
with
Teddy Roosevelt.
A man called Wallace.
Okay.
Who was very, very left-wing.
Uh-huh.
Some people say he was a communist. I don't think he was. But he appealed to us somehow, this Wallace. And we had friends who were working for him. So we even helped him a little bit, I remember. But that was besides the point. The Alta Elena we read about, we heard about, but we didn't go into it in depth. Of course, once we came to Israel, it was the topic of conversation. And I still don't know who was right and who was wrong. I still don't know. I mean, I had been in Beitar, and I think if somebody's bringing weapons in the middle of a war, they should not have been stopped. But that's hindsight. You've talked to people who've been at the
Sure,
Alta
of course.
So what do they tell you?
Everybody says something different, you know. Everybody says something different. It's something and that's why I like to ask the question, because people have different opinions about the Altalena, which I think is a very tragic episode in our history.
Right.
Yeah.
We should not have been fighting one another
No,
when
of
we were
course
in the
not.
middle of a war,
Of course.
fighting 6 different countries,
Yeah.
different Arab countries.
It's
a
just,
very,
it's
very
just
stupid
interesting
thing
for me
do.
to ask people that question. Where were they? What do they think about it? You know, I'm sure when you got to Tel Aviv, you could still see the Altalena on the beach.
Right. I went to visit my aunt. I had an aunt in Tel Aviv. This is the brother who said the Pardes can't support.
Yeah.
So we went to visit my aunt, and she showed it to us. She was there. She heard it. I had a friend who was on the Altalena that I met here. She turned out to be my neighbor, but she was also in Beitar, older than I was. She was on the Altalena.
She probably got off on Kfar Vitkin.
I haven't.
Yeah, a lot of people got off in Kfar Vitkin, and then it went down to Tel Aviv, and then the battle broke. Well, the battle broke out in Kfar. But anyways, I just wanted to ask you that question because of you being somebody who was active in Beitar.
But at that point in my life, it was all focused on getting here and having some money, and him finishing
his state boards.
What happened was that he failed one of them, and he had to do it over. So we had to postpone our trip, and I was very upset with him. Why did he fail the test? I remember that. And I was working as a waitress on Madison Avenue at the lunch crowd, you know, when they come in. And I had never been a waitress before.
It's hard.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
And I wasn't very good at it. But I did make money.
But it was temporary. It was temporary.
It was temporary.
Did you ever take your agricultural career anywhere?
Well, I'll tell you. On the kibbutz, I did. I learned about subtropical plants at the Akko experimental station. They sent me. I mean, you know, on a kibbutz you don't decide, but we decided I wanted to do that and to start growing avocado. And that's what we did. We sent away for seeds from California, and we were in touch with a professor at Rehovot. His name was Oppenheimer, Hans Oppenheimer. And they did grow avocado in experimental stations, or some people had a garden and they had a tree, but never on a commercial basis. And we were really the first group of people who began commercial growing of avocado. But we didn't stay long enough to see it through.
Why did you guys leave the kibbutz?
I wouldn't have left. I liked it.
You liked it?
I liked it. But it was very difficult for my husband. He worked as a dentist in four different kibbutzim in the area, and we didn't have a car. There was one tender.
Yeah,
truck. That's all. And the tender had to take him in the morning and bring him back in the evening, except on the days that he worked at Gesher Ziv. When he worked at Gesher Ziv, he was there. But the other days he went to Matsuba or Chanita or Beta Emek.
Beta Emek, yeah.
Yeah, 3 different kibbutzim and Gesher Ziv.
How long did you guys last in the kibbutz? How long did you guys stay?
You see, my daughter was born there, about 2.5 years. I would have stayed.
Yeah, you would have stayed?
I would have stayed.
And then when did you guys come to Jerusalem?
In 51.
51. And why Jerusalem?
That's another question. I wanted to go to Rehovot.
To the faculty.
Because I would be able to continue with this professor. I would be able to continue my studies. But I already had a 1-year-old daughter. And I was pregnant with daughter number 2. And he got a job with Kupat Cholim in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem always had an appeal. Any Zionist always had a feeling for Jerusalem. So we decided with a daughter and a half, I probably wouldn't manage very well with studies. So it would be a better idea to come to Jerusalem. And my in-laws bought us an apartment.
The ones from the Bund? The communists?
Yes. Oh, communists. They worked, by then, he was no longer working as a tailor. He had his own factory, you know. The communists don't remain communists. And they were doing well.
They bought you an apartment?
They bought us an apartment.
Very nice.
in Rehavia.
Wow.
Yeah, a small one.
Okay.
Yeah. And they wanted us to leave. They came to visit us on the kibbutz once. They came into the kitchen and they saw me inside a big pot, scrubbing it from the inside. And my mother-in-law looked and said, "Do you know Yiddish at all?" No.
No, what did she say to you? Say it in Yiddish.
Nu, darf man gehen in college? בשביל זה את הולכת ללמוד? They didn't think that was a good idea at all, and they wanted us to leave. But they wouldn't have succeeded if he didn't want to leave also. And I understand, it was very, very difficult because the tender was not always available.
Yeah.
And he carried his equipment in a box. And very often they didn't come to pick him up, and he stood there with a great big crate of his equipment waiting for a tramp, for a hitchhike to get back to the kibbutz. And I was convinced.
I want to ask you
Yes.
if you can try and find that photograph of you and Jabotinsky.
It isn't just me and Jabotinsky, it's the group of...
Yeah.
Let's see if I can find...
Wait a minute,
Yes.
wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We're going to do it like this. Wait a sec.
Manhattan Center.
Wait a sec.
We were standing, we had sort of an honor guard for him, and he before he began, or was it after, it was before he began his speech, he surveyed us. And we stood, the entire speech we stood there, but not in Zrom, probably Amod Noach or something.
Can you point to tell me exactly which one you are again, just so that...
I am, there are only 3 girls, right? Only 3 girls, and I'm this one here, the first girl to the right.
And who's that in back of Jabotinsky? Do you know? Does it...
He was working in the office there as a revisionist. I forgot his name.
And this is when he gave his speech where? At the...
Manhattan Center in New York. And you know, half a year after that, he died.
And that's the story that you told us about, that he died at...
Yeah, at Camp Beitar.
Where was Camp Beitar located? Was it in the Catskills?
In the Catskills.
Huh? Wait a sec. When you look at that picture now, what does it do to you?
You know, of all these people here, I'm the only one that's in Israel.
What do you think Jabotinsky would have said to you if he would have known you ended up on a kibbutz?
He would have been very pleased. I'll tell you, his philosophy was not what you would think. There's something different when you don't have your country, and it's not there yet, and you have to establish it, and you have to fight for it. And it's another thing once you've got it. We thought we got it at that point when we were there. So there's no longer, so it's fine to be at a kibbutz and to be a farmer and to be a dentist and to be anything, to study and to, because we're no longer building our castles on sand, but on solid rock. At least that's what we thought.
Haviva, I'm going to ask you one last
Do
question.
I still have to hold this? Or can I
No,
let
you
go?
can put it down. You can sit down,
Okay.
please. I just want to ask you, when you look back at everything that you went through and everything that you did, and you look at the country as it is right now today, do you feel good about what we have here today, or do you have mixed emotions about it?
Well, I think we did a fantastic job. Well, here's my chair. Can I sit down?
Yes.
I think we did a fantastic job. I think we, in our wildest dreams, I don't think we thought we'd ever get to the stage that we're at.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to realize that we're going to be at war all the time, and that we have these terrible problems with our neighbors, that we're living in such a bad neighborhood. And it's worrying. But I'm not disappointed. It'll be okay. I tried to be optimistic. I think from year to year, we're becoming better and better. I think we have a very good army. I think we make many mistakes, but the very fact that when I arrived here, there were a little over 500,000 Jews. And today, what have we got? 7 million? And not only that, we don't have anybody living in a ma'abara. We have poor people, but we don't have anybody living in a ma'abara. And I think the story about hungry children is not exactly correct. Everyone has enough for bread. And I think that we have to solve many difficult problems. I don't know how we're going to solve them. I don't think anybody knows how we're going to solve them. But I think, considering everything we've done so far and everything that's happened to the Jewish people, and look where we are, I think we have to be optimistic. Because we've survived everything so far and only gotten better and stronger. And I hope that these elections are bad. People are awful. You hate everyone.
Do you remember a time in Israel when there was elections where you felt that you didn't hate everybody, that you were...
This is the worst.
This is the worst.
This is the worst. This is the worst, really. I don't think it's ever been so bad. And I think right now we're in a stage where we don't have anybody. There's nobody. I mean, there's a slogan of Rak lo Bibi, but okay, lo Bibi as me.
Yeah.
It's also a rather stupid slogan, because if you're working for something, say what you want and don't say what you don't want.
Right.
The only thing you want is what you don't want. I don't know. All the time that I've been here, I haven't voted consistently for one or the other.
Always vote for, yeah.
I've always looked at
The picture around at the time, and then...
at the time.
Yeah.
And there were times when I voted Avodah, and there were times when I voted Likud, and...
Sure. It's like, my parents, I think, voted Begin in the 70s and early 80s. I think they voted Labor in the 90s.
Right. We looked at the situation.
Sure.
And, did I do something to this time?
No.
We looked at the situation, and... but this time, Maybe I'll vote Aleyarok, who knows?
Haviva, I want to thank you so much for
You're
this.
very welcome.
I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I just have to tell you one more fact.
Please.
That I have 13 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. And more to come, I'm sure, because most of them are not married yet. So that's an accomplishment.
Big
Big,
time.
and they're all here. They're all here. Meanwhile, you never know with the grandchildren, but meanwhile they're all here. So that's good. ויהיה בסדר. צריך להיות.
תודה לך. אני
Okay.
מכבד את המצלמה ואני ממש, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.